Hello and welcome to Pickle TV. I'm your host, Amanda Kowski. I'm Gary's daughter and I'm visiting family, and Gary's asked me if I would host some episodes of Pickle TV, so here I am. Now, if you found our show on Facebook, YouTube, or any other video sharing site, please check out our website at www.pickle.tv. It's the place to find all the videos that Gary will record from all the conferences he will attend. If you like the show and you like these conferences, please tell your friends about Pickle TV. You may also think about subscribing if you really like it. Now, in this episode, I'm bringing you another speaker from the Emerging Tech Conference that was held in Dallas, Texas during June 2012. If you're not familiar with the Emerging Tech Conference, you should really check out their website at www.etcdallas.com. On this episode, I bring you Mike Orren. His presentation, All New Media in New Media. Let's watch it now.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming out on a Sunday morning. I frankly was concerned I'd be here talking to myself, so glad so many of y'all could come out. A lot of great stuff yesterday, and a lot of it was really good, sort of tactical blocking and tackling kind of stuff. What I want to do today is kind of go back out to 40,000 feet and talk a little bit about how what all the things you've been learning, how they fit into the larger media ecosystem. As Tony said, I've been working in media for a long time. I'm kind of a media junkie. I started out at D Magazine and then worked in B2B publishing and then did Pegasus News, and now doing a new venture that I'll talk a little bit about. But above all, I kind of read, absorb, and follow every digital trend I possibly can. My RSS reader is kind of overpacked, and I synthesize all of that stuff. And I really realized coming into this year, and I think it's playing out, that this year, 2012, is really a pivotal year in what we see and how media is going to be. And I think we're going to look back and say, yeah, the internet was sooner, but this is the year that everything really started coming together and changing. And I'm going to talk about that today. One caveat, the way I approach these things is sort of a blend of science and art. I do a lot of, look at a lot of statistics, but I also know that there's a lot of damn lies in statistics. So I often will see trends almost just as much from talking to a local business as opposed to what's in Business Insider or Forbes or Wall Street Journal this week. So there's, I might see a stat on employment, but what really tells me what's going on in the market is when I meet a guy who owns a dance studio in East Dallas, and he tells me that his weekend classes are packed and his weekday classes have gone fallow because so many more mothers are working. That tells me something about the economy, maybe more than what the numbers do. So it's an inexact science. Talking about 2012, though, I do want to start by letting you know that it's worth listening to this because the Mayans are wrong. I'm fairly certain that we'll still be here at the end of all of this. But this is the year of big change. We may not have the flying cars that I expected when I was a kid. Also, a warning, never do a Google image search for Jetsons without Safe Search on. That's the reason why we have this car instead of a cartoon. But while the internet, people like to talk about the formation of the internet, and they often compare it to Gutenberg's press in 1439. And where I think people get that wrong to an extent is Gutenberg changed the world, but it didn't change the day that he started printing. So when you went to him printing, you went from having just the king and the pope able to read what was being hand inscribed to just the king and the pope and a few select nobles, right? It took years, decades at that time, more than a century before everybody out on the street was reading. And I think there's real analogs for that in what we look at. So, when they talk about the Gutenberg moment of the internet, I think it's something more like this. Make it sound?
Turning on your home computer to read the day's newspaper. Well, it's not as far-fetched as it may seem.
This is 1982.
Local San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.
17 stories up in his fashionable North Beach apartment, Richard Howard is calling a local number that will connect him with a computer in Columbus, Ohio. Meanwhile, across town, in this less than fashionable cubbyhole of the San Francisco Examiner, these editors are programming today's copy of the paper into that same Ohio computer. When the telephone connection between these two terminals is made, the newest form of electronic journalism lights up Mr. Howard's television with just about everything the Examiner prints in its regular edition. That is, with the exception of the pictures, ads, and the comics. 8 newspapers around the country are currently in the computer network, and within the next few weeks, 3 others will join in.
This is an experiment. We're trying to figure out what it's going to mean to us as editors and reporters and what it means to the home user. And we're not in it to make money. We're probably not going to lose a lot, but we aren't going to make much either.
Both the Examiner and Chronicle began service within the last 2 weeks and printed full-page ads about it. Of the estimated 2,000 to 3,000 home computer owners in the Bay Area, the Chronicle reports over 500 have responded by sending back coupons. Even though the electronic newspaper isn't as spiffy looking as the ads imply, people using the system are excited about its potential.
With the system, we have the option not only of seeing the newspaper on the screen, but also optionally we can copy it. So anything we're interested in, we can go back in again and copy it onto paper and save it, which I think is the future of the type of interrogation an individual will give to the newspapers.
This is only the first step in newspapers by computer. Engineers now predict today will come when we get all our newspapers and magazines by home computer, but that's a few years off. So for the moment at least, this fellow isn't worried about being out of a job. Steve Newman, News Center 4.
Well, it takes over 2 hours to receive the entire text of the newspaper over the phone, and with an hourly use charge of $5, the new telepaper won't be much competition for the 20-cent street edition.
That's hilarious, but what's not hilarious is that's barely, 25 years ago, 30 years ago. Think how far we've come over that short period of time and how fast, and the tempo is only accelerating. So, again, the Gutenberg moment actually comes afterwards. For us, it comes a little faster, and I'll get into why in a second. And so I've got 12 conveniently numbered reasons why I think 2012 is the big year. I do like to give a caveat, though. This is fun prognostication. We're going to have some discussion towards the end. I think y'all will probably have some of your own ideas, and I want to hear those. But I always hearken to my favorite singer-songwriter who says, I may share some of my opinions with you tonight. It's not because they're smart or you need to know them. It's because they rhyme. Take it all with a grain of salt and don't go make investments based on anything I say. So reason number one, Moore's Law. Who knows what Moore's Law is? Okay, just enough people who don't. I'm going to talk a little bit about it. So basically, Moore's Law says that the number of transistors that can be placed inexpensively on a circuit doubles about every 2 years. That's the reason why we went from 1,000 people total in San Francisco having a computer to now every one of you has a device in your pocket that probably has more memory capacity and firepower than what was used to launch the early space rockets, right? That's the big shift. Interesting little twist though on Moore's Law, and there's some debate about this, is there's a theory in it that there is a point where that's just no longer possible because the doubling becomes so fast that you can't even see it, right? They call it the singularity. So where the idea is, it's almost to the point where you can't get just a new iPhone model every year. You may be getting one every week or every month. They make constant iteration of technology. So that's important, not because just of the devices we have, but the way that we're all using them to communicate and the things that are possible that weren't before. And so it leads to a lot of non-technological shifts that are surprising. This past year was the first ever Pulitzer for real-time reporting. Real-time reporting is a fancy name for tweeting. Woodward and Bernstein had never heard of a tweet. I remember in the early days of Wikipedia how you can't trust that. How dare anyone source a fact on Wikipedia? And then a few months ago, we were fighting to make sure that it stayed free. When they shut it down for a day, it was like a crisis of students can't act, writers can't write. Siri, even though it doesn't always work the way we want, it certainly isn't as clever as when John Malkovich talks to it. I mean, that's magic. I didn't, when I was a kid, I had a rotary dial telephone, and now I'm talking to my phone. Y'all remember, if you saw in Minority Report, remember everybody, the thing they talk about is how Tom Cruise is doing this with his hand and moving everything around? Yeah, there's a device called the Leap that's coming out first of the year. I think it's less than $100. It's going to make that work on your computer. We are in the future. Another piece of that, though, is the concept of the long tail has hit a new inflection point. And a quick long tail for those who haven't followed that. The concept of the long tail is that Amazon and big sellers, and because of the internet, it enables the little titles, the things that only sell 10, 20, 100, 200 copies, to be a major piece of the economics of the web. What's that happening with that, though, as technology advances, is those little titles, those niche things that often are maybe self-published and used to not be super sophisticated, now can have all kinds of multimedia, high production values. It's almost impossible to distinguish now between a record label produced or publisher produced piece of product and what somebody's created in their living room. And that's why it's not often a good idea to go against what Seth Godin says, but he came out as the Domino project he had at Amazon died, saying that because there's such a long tail, nobody can produce great bonus extras because nobody can afford to do it and compete. I'd argue that with what's happening with Moore's Law and that constant doubling is that instead of it locking out people from competing, everybody's going to be able to produce something. Well, not everybody, but people in this room are going to be able to produce something of incredible production value. And I'll show you some example of that later. Second trend, and I think this may be the biggest one that we're going to see this year, is finally our TVs and our computers are becoming one. We've been promised that for more than a decade, and I personally am annoyed that my TV interface still wouldn't embarrass a 2002 BlackBerry owner. It's pretty rudimentary, and we're finally getting to the shift in that. And that's really important, because I know we talk in here a lot about what we do on the web and on our mobile devices, but TV is still, by reach, the most important medium, and that includes real-time TV. I know we all think we watch everything on the TiVo. This chart, I know it's a little hard to see, but there we go. This is all to scale. This is the time by age that people are spending on a computer on the internet, which is big. It's bigger than us watching time-shifted TV. We got video on internet, video on mobile device. This is real-time traditional television. We are not abandoning television. And so imagine what happens when we get out of this rudimentary sort of CompuServe version of TV internet and it all becomes one. I'm an Apple fanboy, but I know it's not just the Apple TV that's a part of that. And the existing Apple TV device is just a start. I think everybody's heard that Steve Jobs claimed, before he died, that he had solved the TV thing, and everyone expects Apple to come out with something really big this year. But there's other players too. Verizon now has a deal that's a single cable wireless box for your house that provides your internet and your access on all your TVs. Samsung is the biggest maker of TVs, huge maker of mobile devices. They've got a smart TV product that's really coming along. Obviously, Google's a player. The one thing I think I'm a little bit of a heretic on, everybody's expecting actual TVs that are going to do this. I'm a little skeptical because I don't know that I'm going to want to trade in my big flat screen TV every time there's some new technology. So I really think we're going to see, and I'm stealing this phrase from Fred Wilson, who writes the ABC blog, abc.com I think it is. I think we're going to have dumb TVs and smart boxes, at least for a good while. But this is going to be a huge shift. And not just in what we consume, but what's available for us to consume. Because the media that we're most used to using, that this is going to tremendously impact, is our old friends there at Channel 8 and all of our other local TV stations. The bundling, the forced bundling of that network content that was the primary thing that people consume is what keeps those stations going and able to provide our local programming. So you've got to ask, when I no longer have to go watch my shows on the, and you're already flipping past their ads with your TiVo, you know, when you're getting all of your TV from the internet, you have tremendous range of choices among things that weren't even broadcast before. You know, what happens to these guys? And if you don't think that they're feeling it, you can see the big moves from the networks. This is the first year ever that the Super Bowl was live streamed on the internet. Live stream on the internet, AKA not showing you local ads. Just the ESPN finals, there were about 300,000 people watching it live streaming, which isn't a huge number, but considering that that's primarily watching it on tiny screen devices and people who are on the move, without some of the conveniences of the primary broadcast version, it's a big change in that consumption pattern. Another key thing, we're going to start seeing, I think, a lot fewer homes with true computers in them, you know, with the CPU and the typing and or a laptop, and a lot more people just using a tablet device, whether it's the iPad or an Android device or the new Microsoft Surface. But you're also seeing it bring a lot more people into the internet community. My mother never would get on the internet just on a computer. A tablet's a very easy device for her to do that. And then she's on Facebook, she's not on Twitter. You know, more people engaging on a more active level. This is my favorite one. Traditional advertising, at least as we know it now, is clearly in big trouble. I mean, there's been recent studies that banner ads, which it's kind of funny to call that traditional advertising because they didn't exist 20 years ago, less than a third of them that get counted by ad servers actually get seen by human eyes. You know, and that's from a number of reasons. One is, I mean, the idea of a portal, like our old friends at CompuServe here, is really dead. I saw it at Pegasus News. I know other media outlets that I consult for see it. The homepage is no longer the entry point. The homepage is often no longer even your most trafficked page. Every page is a landing page. So when Sean talked about how Copyblogger was focused on landing pages, that is really every internal page on your site, because people aren't coming in your front door. Maybe they're coming in through search, but more likely they're coming in from Facebook or Twitter. I know most news outlets I see now on a day in, day out basis are getting more of their traffic from social than they are from Google. And that's a huge, huge shift. You know, and then you've got these interruptive ads that we're all learning don't work and you know tend to junk up the experience. There's been a lot of studies that the fewer ads on a page, the more engagement there is with the ads on the page. You know, there's going to have to be a format shift for these to work. And then you've got people trying to do customization. I know this is a print edition, but this is an example of how if you can't get right the picture of the sinking ship with the ad to win a dream holiday in your print edition, how are you going to deliver me a personally customized experience on the web? So I don't know exactly, there is no silver bullet of what's going to replace traditional ads. I think a big piece of it is content marketing, and we're going to talk about that. But I do have some thoughts on things that we'll see. This is actually a slightly doctored page from the New York Times. What's not doctored here is the fact that I can see what my friends on Facebook are reading on the New York Times because they're that tightly integrated. What is added here is Facebook advertising. And I think one of the things that we're clearly going to see as publishers get more integrated with Facebook is they're not going to be able to monetize with their own ads, so they're going to pull in Facebook ads for a tiny piece of the action. I mean, they've done that with Google for years. This is another level closer that I think we're going to see very, very soon. Groupon has been the big story of the last couple of years, and daily deals market. And they're actually, I saw a stat not long ago that in 2011, there were over 400 daily deals companies that went out of business. There's even more than that still out there. There's sort of a saturation of that. Obviously, folks have seen and heard of the horror stories about businesses getting overwhelmed by Groupon type deals, living social type deals. Increasingly, what you're going to see is the individual merchants able to use tools to create their own deals on the fly and have them be much more limited to when they actually need the business, and probably as much loyalty programs as they are acquisition programs. But the daily deal fad is something that I think we're going to see waning. Talk just briefly about, I think another thing you're going to see is agencies and media companies doing things that you just never thought they would do. My new company, Speakeasy, is a digital media agency heavily focused on social and content marketing. But the twist, one of the twists is we're the preferred social media partner of the Dallas Morning News. And we're going to be using Dallas Morning News content on sites and on social properties of Dallas Morning News advertisers to help create high quality, high yield content that will engage their customers. So the idea is not just is that content a wrap for advertising, it can then leave that environment and be used in niches and verticals to help local merchants drive people in the door. And I think you're going to see other experiments like that in coming months. There's also a lot of attempts to monetize what blogs are doing on a global basis. And those of you who are WordPress users may be aware that there's a deal with Federated Media where they're going to place ads on your sites, or they can place ads on your sites. It's an interesting thing. I wouldn't bet the farm on it. It's not going to get you a ton of high yield advertising. Networks tend to be a really low cost per thousand. So it's something to play with, but I don't know that it's a big thing. Really key though, and this is, I'm going to kind of harken back to Sean's talk yesterday. Everybody's talking about content marketing being the hot new thing. It's really the way we've marketed for years. We tell stories to each other. The image here is from one of my favorite movies called A Face in the Crowd, and Andy Griffith is doing an ad on a TV show, but the ad is not a traditional commercial. It's him talking about how the product interacts with his show, and in this case, he's actually making fun of the advertiser, and it sends the advertiser's business through the roof. It's not a new thing. It's just getting back to what we've always done. And a great example of this, I'm going to do a bit of a video clip here, is Coke, which is the biggest display and broadcast traditional advertiser in the world. We all know Coke ads. We've all seen dramatic Coke ads. So here is what Coke's head of marketing has to say about the role of content in their business.
Content 2020. How the Coca-Cola Company will evolve its approach to the creative agenda on its key brands. We will move from creative excellence to content excellence. Chapter 1. How does content excellence approach liquid and linked content development? The purpose of content excellence is to create ideas so contagious they cannot be controlled. We call this liquid. And these ideas are so innately relevant to our business objectives, our brands and consumer interests, we call this linked. And through the stories we tell, we will provoke conversations and earn a disproportionate share of popular culture. The conversation model we have developed begins with brand stories. These brand stories create liquid and linked ideas. These liquid and linked ideas provoke conversations. Then we need to act and react to those conversations 365 days a year. Chapter 2, the case for change. So what is the case for change? We have 3 key drivers. First, we intend to double the size of our business. That's a lot of incremental servings. Second, we've observed a distribution of creativity. No one now has the smarts and ideas, and in fact, consumer-generated stories outnumber Coca-Cola Company-generated stories on most of our brands. And we must fuel both of these truths. The third is the distribution of technology. We now have greater connectivity and consumer empowerment than ever before. This has driven an on-demand culture where consumers can turn their demands on 24 hours a day. The good news is that technology can enable brilliant creativity. We can develop ideas where we cannot separate the message from technology. Let's take a look at 12 Force or Tipex. We can leverage existing consumer behaviors as IKEA have done on Facebook. And we can develop deeper emotional connections through our storytelling, as the Golf GT mobile iPhone app has done. But we must integrate technologists into the core creative team, and we must develop direct relationships with technology companies.
So that is the biggest brand advertiser in the world, and that's what they think marketing is now. That to me is a sign of a huge shift and an opportunity for everybody who's creating content. Because as Coke goes, so goes a lot of the advertising world. By the way, that video, there's a lot more to that. It goes on for a good hour or more, but you can find it on YouTube. Just search Coke 2020. Really, really recommend. It's a great watch. Trend number 6 is that everybody has a CMS now. Whether you're on WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, it's more than just a blogging platform. And I know Scott Kingsley-Clark's going to talk today probably a bit about Pod CMS and that kind of tool. But there's so much stuff out there that gives you really, if not the same power as a major media company, in a lot of cases more. I work with a lot of media companies and see them stuck in legacy technologies that aren't as flexible as what you're using today. Beyond that, I think there's some neat tools that can take you to an even higher level. Couple I've seen that have been used to good success. Witchbox Media is actually a local company, and they have a thing that it's sort of a highly customized Drupal that's perfect for publishers. Also, I've done some work with a company out of Colorado called Compost. If you have a lot of contributors to a site, it's a virtual newsroom. It allows you to manage an editorial calendar. It actually pays the writers as soon as you approve the story via PayPal. And it neatly integrates with WordPress and actually any CMS that anybody's using. I did a setup where Examiner.com is now pushing several thousand stories a month to CBS through that, and it goes straight from there into the right local CBS site in draft mode, so their editors can just make it live. So a lot of tools out there that can empower you. Next one, and this is one that I've got kind of a personal affinity for, is nobody knows what a book is anymore because of the editions and versioning. The recent Steve Jobs book very likely is going to be updated where your e-version will be different substantially and have additional material down the road that the print version never did, or you might have had to buy another print version for. And it opens up a lot of Pandora's boxes, and it's something that I've been playing with myself. I've got a project I'm working on. I'm doing a book, or I started out doing a book on an organization here in Texas called the Prison Entrepreneurship Program. And I could get more into that offline, but it's basically a program that puts soon-to-be-released felons through a business school program to help them launch their own businesses when they get out, and because often they can't get hired as a felon. Highly successful program, so I started doing a book on it. A couple things. One, the technology of writing a book is so different than it used to be. It's not just a word processor. I'm using a tool called Scrivener that allows me to manage like sort of a corkboard storyline, files on all the characters, all this multimedia, and then that can flow very easily, effortlessly. It's easier to use than, say, Word, into the iBooks format. And then obviously, there's Kindle and other formats that you can use with that too. But the project kind of got out of hand because I wound up talking to some friends at the Mayans School of Journalism up at UNT about it, and next thing I knew, we had a class shooting a documentary alongside me as I was researching the book. So now I've got a website where we can put video, because I've got a couple hundred hours of video that would never make a documentary. We've got ostensibly a DVD version, maybe a broadcast version, and a book that I'm going to embed the video in. When we introduce a new character, we're going to get a little video clip of it. So at this point, when somebody asks me what the project is, I don't even know anymore. And I'm certainly not alone in that. I think you're going to see multimedia becomes the norm. The story may never end. If we're following these guys who are struggling to make it and not get back into prison, 6 months later it's going to be very easy to add another story to that. But I don't know what the economic model is to pay for that. Going direct to customers has been a trend of the last few years. Now it's mainstream. Do y'all know who knows Louis C.K., the comedian? Lots of people. Who didn't know him before his direct video? Curiosity. About a third. So, for those who don't know the story, Louis C.K. is a popular comedian, but certainly not at the tier where he's, a name that would say get a regular network show. He's got a show on FX Network. He's very popular, but he did a video. Instead of going on HBO or working through a distributor like he normally would, he put out his own money, he got his own trucks, he got his own people, and he did a couple interesting things. He filmed his own performance, then he put it up online after it had been professionally edited, and he sold it. I think the price was $5, he got you 2 downloads. There was no digital rights management on it, and it went through the roof. He made his money back in an afternoon, more or less, and brought in, I haven't seen the latest tally, the last I looked at it, well over $1 million. He shared that money with his team, and basically came out of that saying, I may never go through a publisher again. There's a lot of that kind of stuff. This lady here is the social media editor for the New York Times. She says that she doesn't think her job's going to exist in 3 years not because social media is going away, but because it is such an integral part of everything we do, everybody's just going to be doing it. You're not going to need somebody else focused on it for the paper because it's the same as writing the story. Kickstarter, obviously becoming a very mainstream, and there's lots of other crowdfunding sources for you to take a product and go out and go straight to your users and your fans and sell at big and small levels, basically pre-sell a project. I did a Kickstarter on my book. It wasn't through Kickstarter, I think it was through Indiegogo. There was a really fascinating story in the last couple weeks. If you read The Oatmeal, the comic strip, Matthew Inman is the artist, and he does funny and often profane comics. And a year ago, he got into a kind of war with a site called Funny Junk that was reposting all of his content. And he called them out, and there was some name calling, and then it went away. Well, a couple weeks ago, they decided to sue him for defamation in the things that he said, and they sued him, and they wanted $20,000. So he went to, I think it was Indiegogo, it was definitely a crowdfunding site, and said, well, here's the deal. I'm not going to back down to these guys, and I'm not going to give them $20,000, but I want to raise $20,000, and I'm going to give half of it to the American Cancer Society, half of it to the National Wildlife Foundation, and I'm going to take a picture of the money and send it to the Funny Junk guys with a cartoon of his mother having intercourse with a bear. He hid $20,000 in 5 minutes. Again, I haven't checked it in a while, but the last I saw, he was up somewhere around $250,000. And it was in 5s and 10s. It wasn't big donations. And increasingly, you're going to see going direct. Another version of going direct is buying online. Best Buy's been scaling back its stores. There's a great local guy who's a commerce retailer named Stephen Dennis, and I like his line on this. E-commerce and retail has become a difference without a distinction. And as retail goes, so does traditional advertising in a lot of ways. So that's another trend to watch. Maybe it doesn't affect us all directly, we can't get involved in it, but this is definitely a year where all the big players are going for the throat. You got Facebook IPOing, you've got Microsoft throwing out a tablet to compete with the iPad, Apple pulling Google Maps off of iOS. If you have an iPhone now, your Google Maps will be gone in the next update and be replaced with an Apple Maps product. Think about what that does to SEO planning for mobile. There's a lot, you just gotta watch what these guys are doing because their fallout will impact us. One way it impacts, this is a quote I loved on books. This is a publisher talking about Amazon's business model. It says, we can't pay $1 million for books anymore. Amazon could probably afford to lose $20 million a year in their publishing arm just to put the publishers out of business. What they're trying to do is throw money around in an industry that doesn't have any until Amazon becomes not only the only place where you buy books, but the only place that publishes books too. Another side note, this is a really widely read, retweeted, pushed around quote. The time it came out, it was in a publication that hadn't existed a week before. It was in Pando Daily, which is where all the TechCrunch refugees went and that fallout. Really fast-moving market right now. The economy's not so good, and it doesn't help when our banks get downgraded, and like on Friday we had a huge drop in the market. What that means in sort of a digital sense is the election year becomes even more hotly watched with the economy as a top issue, and the way people advertise and market obviously has changed. And while it's happened incrementally year over year, this is the year where you're going to see more of the spend going online than ever before. Google has a whole tool now to help people running elections use Google to market. There's tools like Vodafone's actually, the CTO of that, or the tech team on that is my old tech team from Pegasus, and they're working with guys from Mint.com to create a voter engagement platform that's a more direct connect than, say, running a TV ad. You've got Facebook ads filling I'm sure you've seen them filling your screens for elections. So while this isn't going to obliterate, because TV is certainly still important, it's going to take a big chunk out of that and change the way we engage and vote. And to give you an idea of how big a chunk, when I've worked for TV companies before, most local TV broadcasters don't compare their numbers year over year, their financials, because they can't. They have to compare odd years to even years, because in the election years, their revenues are often 40% higher than in a normal year. If that gets dinged seriously enough in the election, go back to my question about what happens to our local TV providers. And there's engagement that happens. And I know, how many people here actually went and sat in at an Occupy rally or camped? None? One? Two? Couple? Very few, right? That's because, we as a culture don't necessarily get fired up about that stuff, but imagine if something really powerful happens, like, I don't know, Facebook getting shut down. Then we're going to take to the streets. Seriously, the only reason that people aren't out is because they're not directly impacted. And so I would argue that when you see what happened in the Arab Spring and somewhat with the way that people were able to digitally organize for the Occupy movement, if the people in this room get hit hard, imagine how much more that ripple is going to be felt. Another one that's near to my heart, I think journalism is starting to make the comeback that's been needed. A lot of people have been decrying the end of journalism, that blogs were killing journalism and aggregators were, and it's been a hard time. And this is an analogy I've used when I talk to journalists for a while. When the internet really took off, media companies faced a chasm. And there's two ways to react when you hit a chasm. One is the way Wile E. Coyote does it. The other's the way the Duke Boys do it. Media companies, by and large, took the Wile E. Coyote tack, while entrepreneurs and startups have taken the Duke Boys tack. The trick is that either way, you wind up on the other side of the chasm, whether you jumped it or you're Wile E. Coyote crawling out. And when you get to the other side, we're starting to see that people are ignoring kind of the craziness that has been created by SEO wars and trying to everybody get the one big story that everybody's talking about today. Everybody's got to have Justin Bieber in their headlines because it's sort of a mutually assured destruction, right? Everybody is doing the same stuff. And when everybody does the same stuff, nobody really wins. And so what happens is, instead of sending out 1,000 people to make sure that you get that one headline, you get back to the business of one-on-one reporting and finding unique content, creating something that really nobody else has. And so I think we're starting to get to the other side of that. Last trend, and in a second we'll get to some questions and some comments. Everybody was all up in arms about SOPA and really pushing that button a few months ago. The hacker wars that are going on, and people, these guys can shut down the FBI sites. They can do a lot to yours, and they have a lot of reason to want to mess with commerce. Their activity is only increasing, and you're going to see a lot of disruption of the things that we consider sort of de rigueur on the internet. Again, Facebook goes down. Your iPhone stops, Siri stops talking to you. These are the sorts of things that you may see. A few things that we're not going to see. Sadly, even though we all talk about how important mobile is, I still think we're a ways off from the mobile we deserve. Part of that is because there's so many tools out there that work great for geolocating and creating interesting mobile things, but they're all fed by content. And unless you're looking at unless you want to find the local Bennigans, by and large, the content stinks. It's a real opportunity for people on the ground, but if mobile's about local's about content, and beyond the commoditized stuff, there's just not much out there. A lot of people, I think, thought we were going to have these NFCs, the near-field codes that allow you to just pay without using a wallet. That certainly hasn't gone mainstream. Customization, I always, when I see people talk about customization, it always makes me think of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where Douglas Adams writes about, the machine that analyzes every neuron thought you've ever had and, traces everything you might want, and then always delivers a cup of something almost but not entirely unlike tea. That's what most customization is, and we're not going to see a lot of improvement in that. Certainly seeing what's happened with the IPOs of big tech companies and some of these acquisitions of things that don't actually have revenue yet. Certainly we've got bubble thinking, which if we remember the late 90s is going to be dangerous for our economy. And sadly, even though I want my flying car, it's just not here yet. So I would love any questions you've got. If Tony's around with the mic, you can pass it around, or if you want to holler.
I saw us over here first.
Let's give Mike a warm. There's a saying, if you're the smartest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I'm definitely in the right room.
Mike, you showed that 82 clip, and it had a list of newspapers that were doing it. Those newspapers are all either struggling financially or are out of business already. Where did they miss being on the starting on the cutting edge? And obviously they didn't monetize, but
right. Yeah, it was very telling that they said at the beginning, I thought, no advertising, right? There was a couple things. One is that while they never got beyond really for a long time what they were doing there, which was taking the existing content and exactly replicating it as closely as they could in another medium. And that's really what happened with the web. And now we're seeing it happen again as they go to mobile and just take their web experience and drop it on the mobile, when mobile is a very different device. Maybe should focus more on databases and location. And so they kind of stayed asleep too long. There were a lot of opportunities out there that other people had disintermediated them from. I certainly don't think newspapers are going away, and I see newspapers I'm talking to. It may be late, but they finally woken up and are really making some interesting moves. You're seeing it all over the country. I think it's a positive move that the advanced papers, which include like the paper in New Orleans, are going digital only some days and cutting back on the print. I think that's actually a positive step. So, they just really, really missed the boat. And that's why, I talk about people in this room in some cases have more extensible and robust content management systems than top 10 newspapers in the country. So, hopefully that will level out. I think it's incredibly important, particularly on a local level, to have that kind of presence. I do think you're going to see us gravitating more towards a national newspaper and then smaller locals, and maybe that's going to be the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, but they're getting there slowly. Someone back here? Oh, right.
Mike, I'm in the merchant services type of business, so I follow the wallet, the different movements on that. So I'd like to hear your opinion on why you see the wallet is not taking the rapid advance originally hoped for.
Well, part of it, I think a big part of it is the iPhone doesn't have NFC yet, and so many people use that. It's also just merchants are slow to adopt. It's expensive to adopt stuff, especially if it's kind of cool stuff that not a lot of people are using. I mean, I'm a big skeptic, and I know some people won't like this, I'm a big skeptic on QR codes. I just don't see people day in and day out taking a picture of a code, using it, taking to a website. So investing in that, merchants are slow to do that. I think you're going to see more of it though as they get out of more traditional POS systems. Point of sale systems is really what ties a lot of merchants' hands, and that's a very expensive thing often for them to change. And more I see local retailers that I know where the POS system is an iPad and a Square. Square, for anybody who hasn't seen it, you can plug it into any almost any mobile device and use it as a credit card reader. And now it actually does inventory management and all that kind of stuff. So Hypnotic Donuts in my neighborhood, their cash register is a iPad on a little dolly, like a cake dolly, and they enter what you bought and then they spin it around and you sign, and you have the chance to sign up for their email newsletter, and their entire POS system cost them $400. So I think we will eventually see more of that. I think it's going to take more major players getting into the game. Another thing I think you're going to see that it's starting with Apple's announced for the next iOS. I think they're calling it Passbook. Is that right? Yeah. So it's first round of it is it's a way to store all of your rewards cards, and like it'll store your plane ticket, and when your flight changes, it'll change the ticket. I think that's one step away from it also turning into a virtual wallet, where I actually, before Steve Jobs died, had an email exchange with him where I talked to him about this. I think you're going to see where a lot of your transactions at local merchants may be run through the iTunes store, especially if they're doing an offer. They have more credit card numbers than anybody else in the world, and they're used to buying things, with 1 or 2 clicks. Okay, we're back here next. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I think on your 4th point, you had said that it was the end of traditional advertising. You were saying that banner advertising would be considered that, even though it's only about 20 years old. Have you seen a new technology called retargeting, where an ad can follow you as you go along?
Yeah.
How would you rate as far as that, the effectiveness of that being from now into the future?
Yeah, I think what it is it's how do I put it? It's like a vitamin drink for a tired runner. It's gonna help. It's gonna help. It certainly makes them more effective, and as they're more widely used and people become more comfortable with it, it helps. But I really think we're gonna have to see more engaging, creative, maybe the wrong word, but mechanisms, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, the banner ad is a step back. I mean, compare a banner ad to a newspaper ad, and you're able to get a lot less across. I mean, one of the things we found at Pegasus was we had to design all of our advertisers' ads. We wouldn't let them do their own ads unless they had an agency, because people didn't know how to put a call to action and a compelling image in a 468 by 60 or 300 by 250 box. So you're seeing some of it. I'm not talking about stuff that crawls and takes over the page, but abilities, to actually transact within the space is one. Things that are, I think it also ties to content marketing. You're going to see, I think, more long-form type advertising that is pushed to you because you have an interest based on something, or some more contextual stuff that can get deeper. But that specific unit, I think it's tempting for people to stick with it because it's very easy to count. You got this many clicks and you got this many views. But as Sean said yesterday, at the end it's all about how many sales did you get, and that's not so trackable. But I do think retargeting is important. That's a good point.
Mike, I'm curious, with any of your clients, are you hearing some concern about the privacy pushback that we're seeing in the media? There's so much need for data and analytics. And even in my own household, when Facebook started tweaking things too much, my 15-year-old, 16-year-old said, nah, no more, we're gonna go somewhere else. Are you seeing any clients that are starting to be concerned about the pushback or the reactivity that consumers are having with what they're doing with their data?
Actually, no. Until people start canceling accounts en masse, and because when your 15-year-old left, 7 other people signed up. And the majority of people at this point don't care. They just want their pictures of cats, and however they're going to get them is how they're going to get them. So I haven't heard any concern about that. I don't think it's something that you're going to hear the people on Facebook actually worrying about until the numbers start declining instead of growing. And that may be very short-sighted on their parts. I think there's a point of going too far, and I think there's a real danger of one really horrible thing happening where somebody gets accidentally stalked or in some sort of trapped in some sort of horrible situation because of targeting. Then you're going to see that kind of backlash that I think will pull it back. But in the meantime, no, they just want as many people as they can get. Good question. Yeah.
Interesting talk. Thank you very much. I was wondering, in the vein of traditional advertising, your thoughts on digital protectionism, particularly given that Time Warner has patented a method to make commercials unskippable, not only on their DVRs that they're giving to the households, but to retail devices that consumers would buy and put in their homes.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think you're going to see attempts at that, but it's sort of the inverse of the last question, right? Customers are going, I think, to rebel against that. We've gotten really used to skipping with our TiVo, and that will drive a somewhat larger portion, not necessarily massive, but a somewhat larger portion of the market towards piracy. And I think it's also going to drive people more towards mediums like iTunes, like Hulu, where they can, in some cases, get away from that material. So I'm skeptical that'll work, and I think what's going to happen is while Time Warner is doing that, Dish and DirecTV are going to be proudly proclaiming, "Come here because you can skip it on our boxes." Sorry.
Have you seen the virtual newsroom products like Compose making its way into the sites of larger enterprises, like bigger companies adopting that model?
Yeah, absolutely, because everybody wants to find some way to quote-unquote crowdsource content. And it's interesting, and by the way, I bet you guys did great on the buzzword bingo in the course of this talk. They started actually with large media companies. Those were the first companies. What's interesting is Toby, who's the CEO there, has completely refocused because they're finding that marketers are both savvier and bigger customers for them than the media companies. The media companies are doing it with some small piece of what they're doing. And they're much more getting into, say, the Copyblogger marketplace. And in fact, they've just added Scribe from Copyblogger as an internal tool inside Compose. Newsrooms certainly use those kind of tools, but it's much more folks who are marketing doing that. So, but yeah, I think increasingly you're going to see, it's less, I think, about the tool, the fact that they're looking outside for their best content, and they've got their editors and curators inside.
Last week at the YouTube and Google for Users Conference, Coke was there. And Coke said that at least in the YouTube space, fully 1/3 of their advertising, their videos were made by the consumers. And that they see that as a good thing, and that they're actually going to become curators of content and let the people do the advertising. Does that worry you with your lines of business and the things that you are doing when you understand that the people are becoming the advertisers?
Yeah, it's less of a worry than a how do we do that. Like, it's easy to do that with Coke because, gosh, 98% of people drink some kind of Coke product. I mean, even if you don't drink sodas, it's water. So there's lots of people engaging with that experience. The challenge is that the neighborhood furniture store expects a marketer to be able to deliver the same thing when their customer base is so small. And even though Coke has a lot of individual customers doing that, it's such a small percent of their customer base. I don't know what the number is, but let's say it's 1/4%. Well, 1/4% of the customers in a local business is nobody, right? And so that, I think, is the challenge. Is it's sort of like the thing that I've been in organizations before where you sit in a big boardroom meeting and somebody says, "Hey, I've got the answer. Let's make a video and make it go viral." Okay, yeah, let me get, you want fries with that. That's harder than it sounds. So I think, you've got to figure out clever ways for people who aren't Coke to do that. But I think brands that aren't engaging in that are getting burnt. And you see companies like, actually here, JCPenney's really just gotten burned with some of their local, they had, not local, some of their, they had first their pricing changes that customers didn't like, and then they had a backlash because they used a gay couple in one of their ad circulars. And instead of engaging openly with their customers, they did a lot of just like, let's delete posts and stick our heads in the sand. Mary Kay, not Mary Kay, sorry, scratch that, not Mary Kay, the Komen Foundation. When they had the big backlash over Planned Parenthood, you saw that too. So I think it's hopefully becoming more conventional wisdom as there's more case studies out there that say that if you hide from your customers, you lose. But that's a big thing. I think we have one more. Or do you want to come out? Okay, that's fine.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed this week's session. Make sure to come back next week for another video from the Emerging Tech Conference. If you like what Pickle TV is doing, I would ask you to consider dilldomains.com the next time you buy a domain name or website hosting. Dilldomains.com is my daddy's GoDaddy reseller account, plain and simple. So if you like GoDaddy, or if you use GoDaddy, please consider using Dill Domains instead. In other words, buy your GoDaddy stuff from my daddy. Well, that's all for today. So until next week, this is your host, Amanda Kalski, saying goodbye and thanks for watching.